welcome back, or welcome to the first video that you're watching. My name is Brendan. I am an admin on Syndom, a cyberpunk role-playing game that runs on LambdaMOO. You can visit us at www.syndome.org. That's SINDOME.org. I've been doing stuff on Moos for about 13 years. I am a programmer, but I do not know C. And I am not like crazy good with Linux. So I'm making these videos because I've found it relatively difficult to find the information that I want about Moos. There are definitely a lot of MOO resources out there. Some of them are old, some of them are outdated. There's different people maintaining the project or who have created forks or offshoots of the LambdaMOO project, like Todd Sudenstein, sorry if I got your name wrong, that have done Stunt and maybe GammaMOO. I don't know if he does GammaMOO. Maybe it's him. Maybe it's this guy Luke, who I found a GitHub repository with GammaMOO on. But this is kind of my point here, where there's a lot of different people maintaining this project in their own way and adding things that they want, but there isn't really a central repository for it. There is a SourceForge here, but SourceForge is crazy old, and the last thing that was added to it seems to have been in 2011, though there are some really cool things here. If you go to the LambdaMOO SourceForge, and you can Google it, or there's links in the show notes, and that's this page here. You can go to like support. There's a files section, but you can also go to support and patches. And there's a lot of cool patches that people have added. Some of them will work with your LambdaMOO 1.8.1, which we installed on the last video. Some of them work with GammaMOO, like this Goblin extension pack seems to work with GammaMOO, unless you've installed a bunch of these other patches. So there were some patches that, like, you know, from all the way back here, like scattering arguments for 4, list utilities extension, and then there might be a patch in here that changes the way that streaming something works, which Goblin's extension pack, which is a really cool extension pack, uses. So like to use Goblin, you have to be on GammaMOO, or you have to have a bunch of these patches. So in this video, we're actually going to talk about applying patches. In the last video, I had just used some random guy's GitHub LambdaMOO source. But in this video, I've actually gone to LambdaMOO and downloaded the source code for 1.8.1. And I've also created the GitHub repository for it, so it's in 7x/LambdaMOO. And this repository is, at the time of this video, brand new, but I may continue updating it as I do further videos and things like that. So what you see here on my screen might be slightly different than what you see in the actual repository. So for instance, I've added patches. Patches are ways to modify the existing server source code in many cases, or add extensions. So there's extensions and there's patches. Patches change certain core functionality, like this netmulti.c patch is a hack for adding ANSI support. There's some stuff that does stuff here, and we're defining ANSI colors and stuff here, so that you can actually pass certain color codes from the MOO to the terminal, and it will use it. Now this uses the basic like 8 or whatever color codes that terminals supported. I think there's more, like a 256 color set that you can actually use that Xterm supports now, but this is just an ANSI patch. Somewhat hacky, I think, but it works and it's pretty cool. But it does need, so in the MOO itself, you'll need to add support for actually pushing those characters out. So it may not be super useful to you out of the box. Another patch is this file input-output patch. So there's two versions of this here. This is the original patch, but it had some bugs, and so Todd actually went and updated it, which I thought was really cool. So I've added that to this repository, and we're going to use it when we do certain things. So the Moo is kind of a sandbox, closed, walled garden environment, and getting access to the file system wasn't initially supported. So it is if you want to read from files and output to files, which I recommend you probably will, it's not a great idea to store a bunch of stuff in memory. So the database is actually loaded into memory, which means that if you have a 100 megabyte database, you're using 100 megabytes of RAM to store it. If you have a gigabyte database, you're using a gigabyte of RAM to store it, or something along those lines. I just don't recommend you keep a bunch of stuff that could just be in flat files in memory. So file input-output can really help with that. So if you've got, say, a letter object in-game with a bunch of text, or say a book, you don't want to have 57,000 books in your game that all have the entire text of that book stored in a property on an object, even if you could support that much or that big of a database. There's no reason to, because it's just stored and sitting there, and people are never really reading every single piece of it. So storing it in a file and only accessing that file and loading it into the Moo when you need it is a better idea. You may also want to write certain things to disk so they can be accessible via a web interface, like if you want to link character generation to your website or something like that. So in this video, we're going to go through adding or applying a couple of patches. Let me just talk about a couple of these. There's expat and expat, or extxml, which relies on expat. I'm actually not going to tackle this one because it's really difficult, and I have to spend like 4 hours trying to get it to work every time I do it. But there is file greppack, which will allow grepping, and file input-output, P1, but we're going to apply the P3 patch. There's the net multi one, which adds support for ANSI. And then there's time milliseconds, which is a really cool one. Even though precise is spelled wrong, I don't know why. I don't know if it was originally spelled wrong or just where I got it was spelled wrong. But this will allow you to basically get, instead of getting like a timestamp in just seconds, you can get a timestamp in milliseconds, which can be really cool if you want to do things like audit how long something takes. Well, if something takes 1 second or around 1 second or less than a second, it takes 0, and if it takes a second, it takes 1. But if you wanted to know exactly how long it took, or closer to exactly how long it took, to see if the code change that you made it take longer or a shorter time, if you're trying to optimize your code, then time precise is a cool extension for that. There are also a bunch of other extensions and patches, like we talked about over here. Extension pack here, MySQL extensions, SSL support, diffable database extensions or patches. So some of these are patches, some of these are extensions. So let's just start by doing the, well, actually I want to talk about MOO Resources. So this site, listdude/moo, has like so many resources. I want to hug this person. If you ever watch this video, thanks, man or girl or whatever. You rock, because you've like kept this pretty up to date with a lot of stuff. There are Moo core databases here, and there are other things of that nature. So in the last one, we used Minimal.db, which is the absolute minimum available, 3 objects, 2 verbs. Then there's Lambda core, which is like a database dump from LambdaMOO. It's a great thing for getting started. I really recommend it as a starting place. There's also like Hell core, which is from LMDAMOO. I've never actually checked it out, but I've heard LMDAMOO has some pretty cool stuff in it. So, you know, there's a bunch of other ones you can check out. They might have cool things. Then there's this list of file extension patches, or I'm sorry, just extensions, server extensions and patches. I think it's pretty cool. Does some cool stuff. There's Stunt, WAIF data type, SQL, and then there's the patches that are on SourceForge. There's some various documentation, there's code stuff, manuals, helpful links, Moo clients, though these are all pretty out of date. I recommend a web-based client. Syndom puts one out, so you could check that out. And then moocow archives, which is, I've never actually looked at it. So let's get to patching the server. To do that, we're gonna, before we patch, because I actually think this video is about using LambdaMOO database and then patching, we're gonna use the LambdaMOO database. I recommend that you just start over from scratch from the last video and redo this process. So that's what I'm gonna do. I've created that GitHub repository, and in my code here, I have cloned that repository. Let's make sure it's up to date. It is. And I'm going to rebuild the moo from scratch again. So to do that, we've got to do shconfigure. Right? We would then edit our options file, our options.sh, if we needed to, but we're not going to. So I'm going to do make, which will then make the moo. Right? Now we're doing this without patches. So this is just that first part. Then I would do /moo, and I would provide the database file that we want to use. In this case, we want to use /moo, and we want to use lambda core latest db, which you'll see in the repository right here, and then we're going to dump it to my new core.db. So when the moo checkpoints, and it checkpoints immediately upon starting, it will write the any changes to this my new core DB. So now we've loaded the moo, and it is listening on port 7777. So let's move this to the background, Control Z, then we're going to do jobs, we're going to do BG1, so it's running. And we are going to telnet in localhost 7777. So now we're connected. We can type connect wizard to log in. And cool. If you watched the last video, you'll notice this is different, and this has more stuff. I have verbs on me, at verbs me. Number 2 has no verbs, at parents me. But even just at parents, right? We're able to, I wonder if this has that. No. We're able to like do stuff here. We've got a at verbs number 1, right? These are all the verbs that are defined on the number 1 object, or hashtag 1, or however you want to pronounce it, pound 1. I'm going to say number 1, like a number pad or a pound sign. Pound 1, I don't know. So on this object, we've got these verbs. Then we've got props. So at props number 1, properties. All right, we don't have that, but we do have a command line interface where we can eval. So we can do properties number 1. Properties on number 1, it has those properties. So I could do at show number 1 dot aliases, and I see that that value is not set. I could do at show number 1 dot key, at show number 1 dot description, right? If I want to set a description, so if I do lme, you see nothing special. I can show at me dot description. It's nothing. So number 2 dot description equals ASDF. lme ASDF. At list me look self. So at list lists the verbs. So I can see the verbs. I can list a verb that's on me. So I can do at. Don't be confused. So this uses inheritance, right? So number 1 and number 2 is not necessarily directly descendant from number 1, and number 3 is not necessarily directly descendant from number 2. As you can see, I'm number 2, but my parent is number 6. So again, at parents me, generic wizard, generic programmer, generic builder, the player class, the mail receiving player, the generic player, and the root class. So if I do at verbs number 6, you see a whole bunch of stuff. Now, some of these features you'll use and some you will not. It's a great idea to just go through all of them. There's also help file. Just type help. You can get a nice long help file for a bunch of different things in the programming, for programming and other things like that. I don't actually know how to exit telnet on Linux. How do I do it? Control. All right. Great. So, as you can see, it showed that I disconnected. Cool. So we've got the moo running, but we don't actually want it running. We could kill it by killing the process, but that's a bad way to kill it. So let's do telnet localhost 7777, and let's do connect wizard and shut down. Right, so it's dumping. I've disconnected. Now this is showing me that it's dumping, and it dumped the database. Right, so it's done running, and there's my new database, my new core, located somewhere. Is it here? M1, my new core DB, right? So if we look at my new core, we'll see my new core is 23 megs. Minimal.db is 321 megs. And the LambdaMOO core database is 23.14940. This is 4692. So this is a little bit bigger because we've added a description, right? So let's apply a patch. So what we're going to do is go into the patches directory. All right, we're going to take, let's see, file IO 1.5 for P3 patch. Well, first let's go into the file IO directory, right? And let's cat the README. So I want to know what it says. Welcome to file IO. File IO is a patch, blah, blah, blah. You are not telling us anything about what we should do. That's cool. So cat file IO docs.txt. All right, introduction, adds new built-in functions, granting the moo access to do stuff. There's a copyright. Installation. Most of the new code for this patch are in the files extension file IOC and extension file IOH. These files contain the header and implementation information. One line has to be added to BF registers, blah, blah. This has the distribution archive. If you're going to use this patch to install it, just copy file io.patch into the server directory and apply the patch. It is recommended that you use patch to install it, but you can also manually make changes to the server source. First, copy the file io.c and .h files into the freshly untarred server source, add extension file io.c to the csrs line of makefile, and blah, blah, blah. This is actually a good example. If you wanted to learn how to apply patches manually, you could look at the file IO patch, and you could look at what it has you doing here, and you could then sort of puzzle out how you do the patch, right? So let's move this file. Copy file io.patch to /cd patch file io.patch. So I'm assuming right now that it's applying this patch. Well, in reality, not knowing what the hell it's doing. So once this patch is applied, right? What we're going to have is new built-in functions. Like you saw me use the shutdown built-in function to shut down the moo itself. We'll have access to some other built-in functions like file mode and file chmod, which will take arguments and modes and allow us to do certain things. We can read from files, we can write from files. Okay, are you patching? Like, I don't get it. What's happening? If you're going to use this patch to install it, just copy file out of that patch in your server directory and apply the patch. Finally, make the files directory and directory in the MOO server to run in. The only files in this directory will be accessible. So yeah. So this is, well, we'll give this a moment to maybe run and maybe not run. I want to just touch on MooTalk again. MooTalk is a mailing list. It's pretty active. There's a lot of great people on here that are really responsive. I've had questions and people are really, really responsive to them. Some of the maintainers are on here of various different Moo variations. You can also Google around GitHub. So LambdaMOO on GitHub, you'll find various implementations of Moo, right? So this has Unicode support. This is Waterpoint's LambdaMOO source. I think it's been modified from the original. There's re-implementations of Moo running in Ruby and Haskell. This one has IPv6 support and SSL support. This is me right here, yay. Instructions for running it on a Raspberry Pi. Like, there's a ton of different stuff that is available. You can also, like, I've straight up tweeted people questions. Like, there's hashtag LambdaMOO, and you'll find people that have talked about LambdaMOO. A lot of the time, again, they're talking about LambdaMOO, the actual Moo, the game. Well, or the virtual game environment, virtual reality. And then this is the new Moo programming guide, which is basically a port of the Moo programming guide by me to HTML5. And I've also included links to various Moo-related websites and repositories. Again, as it says here, added clarifications and my own experiences to the guide, as well as best practices. It's not complete. There's still stuff that has to happen at the end. And yeah, so definitely not fully complete. I'm starting to wonder if this patch is not going to work. So that's cool and weird. So let's cancel it. Get status. Did it actually change anything? It did not. What the hell? What the hell? All right, so what we're going to do is do this manually. So what I'm going to do is grab the installation instructions, put them in this document here, and what's step one? Oh, greater than file. God damn it. That's why. What do you mean? I swear I put this file in here, right? You saw me do that, right? It's definitely not here. It's in the patches directory. God damn it. All right. Hunk 1, number 1, failed at 27. 1 out of 1 hunk failed. Saving rejects to make file. Patching file. Hunk succeeded. Okay. So 1 out of 1 hunk failed. Saving rejects to make file. Cat make file.end.reject. Okay. So for some reason this didn't work. Basically we just need to add this to the make file. So I'm just going to do that manually. And then we will run make again. Let's see if that works. Okay, so that did work. So if all has gone well, our file IO patch should be included. Again, I don't know C, so I'm just kind of following what these patches do. If you actually look at the patch file, it's just a diff, right? So you can see like it's changing this line to this. And then in BF register, it's adding the file IO stuff, right? And you can pretty easily hack this in yourself, right? This just like looks for specific places in files and adds things. Again, I use the older file IO patch just because I know that that one works. I haven't actually tested the other one. And if we were to patch it, if we were to want to upgrade to the other one, it would be difficult now because we've already patched it once. So we've changed the source code so the diff isn't going to be exactly the same. So we would actually have to manually do the diff or manually do the patch ourselves. So let's look at running moo with new core.db and we'll call it new core2.db, right? Ampersand, can I open db file? New core, my new core, whoops. All right, so Control Z. That's not going to work now. What's the deal with that? It's because I added the thing. All right, let's do not add the little no help thing. Starting task timeout measured in CPU seconds. Binding address already in use. God damn it. Jobs. Okay, so it is running in the background. All right. So we should now be able to connect. Open localhost 7777. Connect wizard. And let's try like file open. So we now have file open. Now it's the incorrect number of arguments because I didn't pass any to it, but it is there where it wasn't there before. I wonder if it adds. Nope. Okay. So quit, and let's see. What else do I want to talk about here with you guys? Applying patches manually is can be sometimes difficult, but if you mess around with it a bit, I think you'll figure it out. So I think that's about it. I think we've just kind of discussed how to apply a patch file. If you needed to do it manually, again, you would have to kind of use the file IO one as an example of the way you would go through and apply one manually. It may be a good idea to practice it on your own, and then again, at that point, you're opening yourself up to a world of patches. But again, if you start applying aftermarket patches out of order, you may end up with code differences that make it so that your patches aren't able to be added. So keep that in mind, or aren't able to be added via patch. You'll have to actually update the code yourself. And I think that's it. Thanks for watching.